Rumors surrounding a potential Toronto Raptors and Utah Jazz trade have been going on for months. And now, with Rudy Gobert and Donovan Mitchell officially off the table, the reports have been heating up in terms of the Raptors potentially acquiring probably the best player now on the Utah Jazz, and that's Bojan Bogdanovic. So I'm going to break down all those rumors and reports, as well if the Raptors should really go through with a deal like this, given the contract situations and what we'd have to give up. Additionally, Dalano Banton was named an All-Star for Team Canada at the Mary Cup action, as well as a whole bunch more news we got to break down in this video. So without further ado, let's dive straight into it. Hello everybody, Ben Rogers here with the Raptors Digest, breaking down the latest Toronto Raptors news. And folks, I've been off for the past week and a half or so. It's down in North California, moving around, bouncing out around in enemy territory. Obviously, we got the best of the Golden State Warriors a couple seasons ago, so a couple Golden State fans down there are still salty about that. Ran into a few of them, a few Sacramento fans, so had a bit of fun there, but we're back covering all the latest Toronto Raptors news, so definitely subscribe to the channel if you want to stay up to date, as we're going full steam ahead heading into this season. But let's dive straight into it. And the first thing we're discussing is about the Toronto Raptors and Utah Jazz trade rumors picking up. Now, as I mentioned in the intro, this has been a topic of discussion amongst pundits, amongst reporters, about how the Toronto Raptors and Utah Jazz seem to constantly be in conversations about a potential trade. Whether it's Rudy Gobert, whether it's Donovan Mitchell, right? It seems like Masai Ujiri and Danny Ainge, the GM of the Utah Jazz, just are always chatting about what deal could potentially be done. And now with those two big pieces off the board, as they've been involved in their own blockbuster trades, the Raptors are being brought up once again for another Utah Jazz player. And this is a report coming out from Bleacher Report that the Raptors are being consistently mentioned as a potential landing spot for Bojan Bogdanovic. Now, Bogdanovic is a guy that we have talked about on this podcast. We've discussed as a player that could be a really cool fit. His most recent season averaged about 18 points per game, shoots close to 40% from the three-point line, and this is a glaring hole in the Toronto Raptors roster. At least it was last season. We'll see how players develop coming into this year, but having a couple guys that can just knock down shots, be explosive scores, especially in the half court. That's where the Toronto Raptors struggle to create half-court offense at times this most recent season. So having more guys that can do that will essentially be key. Obviously, we're hoping for Scotty Barnes, Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby to take steps forward, Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam come back healthy, Precious Achiuwa take a step forward. We just acquired Otto Porter Jr., but having another shooter could always be helpful coming in. Now, there are question marks surrounding Bogdanovic, as he is notoriously one of the league's worst defenders. You look at all the advanced stats, he's usually at the bottom tier in terms of on-ball defense and all that sort of stuff. The Utah Jazz's defense was really kept afloat by Rudy Gobert down there. So definitely doesn't fit the culture on that front for the Toronto Raptors. But as I mentioned, with all the offensive promise and firepower he could bring to, I'd say, our bench, I don't think we'd bring him in to be a starter. He could be a cool fit. So rather than just speculating on what deals could go down, we got to whip out the trade machine, because when you look at the contract situations, when you look at what the Raptors would actually have to give up to acquire Bojan Bogdanovic, and we're not just talking about overcoming the monster of Danny Ainge, obviously a Goliath just like Masai Ujiri in terms of the NBA trade markets. They're always looking to finesse people. That's not the only hurdle the Raptors would have to overcome to acquire Bojan Bogdanovic, but the second one is the fact that it's really tough to match salary, and the only real way to do it is to send away our star boy, Gary Trent Jr., right, our up-and-coming young prospect, three-point shooter himself, midi specialist, averages close to 17, 18 points per game as a 23-year-old last season, gets us buckets, plays defense, does everything we want out of a Toronto Raptors guard, and he'd like to be have to be dealt in any potential package for Bogdanovic, and you'll see when we break out the cap situation. And the first one is sending Gary Trent Jr. and Khem Birch to the Utah Jazz, and in return, we acquire Bojan Bogdanovic as well as Talen Horton-Tucker. And you can see why the salaries match up, because Bogdanovic is making close to $20 million a season, $19.5 million. So in order to acquire that capital, you need to give up that capital. And obviously, we're not trading any of our core guys like Scotty. Well, Scotty is not on a big contract, but Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam for Bogdanovic. OG Anunoby, I wouldn't even think about adding him into a deal. So Gary Trent Jr. is really the only salary that I know some people could potentially argue should be in a Bojan package if a deal is there, especially where he's an expiring free agent after this upcoming season. So there's that. We also, in that hypothetical, acquire Talen Horton-Tucker back to the roster. I threw him in because we know how much Masai Ujiri loves Talen Horton-Tucker, but I'm not doing this deal. Bojan Bogdanovic is 34 years old. He doesn't play the level of defense as Gary Trent Jr. In terms of win now, I'd rather have Gary Trent Jr. on the roster. You could take the flyer on Talen Horton-Tucker. He's been bad for the LA Lakers, especially this most recent season. So I'm staring clear of that individual piece. I want at least 2 surefire starting caliber players if we do trade away Gary Trent Jr. for a package like that, right? Unless you're getting a star back or something on that front. And this is where this second package comes in, which is a little bit more appetizing for a Toronto Raptors fan. And you're sending out Gary Trent Jr., Khem Birch, Malachi Flynn. I threw in Yuta Watanabe in here just because he's still in the roster. The trade machine isn't up to date there for ESPN, so I'm just throwing in one of our low tier players, right? Our bottom guaranteed contracts. Could be Bo Cruz or something to the Utah Jazz in return for Bojan, who we've been rumored for, as well as Jordan Clarkson. Now, this package, I could see the argument for more so because Clarkson is an absolute bucket there off the bench for the Utah Jazz. He comes in, he's an electrifying scorer, much like Bogdanovic, not much a defender, but can create his own shot, can just go absolutely nuclear. Won a 6th Man of the Year for the Utah Jazz, and again, fills another hole for the Toronto Raptors, a backup guard, and on top of it, adds the three-point shooting punch, the scoring punch, that will help us greatly in the half-court offense. But just like Bogdanovic, not much of a defender, and it's tough to get on the court as when you're a minus on defense in a Nick Nurse type of system. So they'd certainly play, they'd certainly get minutes, but maybe they're not most of the attractive guys for Masai Ujiri to be giving this much capital, this much of young talent. Gary Trent Jr., a Flynn who, in his own right, still has potential and all that sort of stuff. Khem Birch, who is a solid insurance big, right? You're giving up all of that for 2 guys who would certainly have an impact, would certainly help us in the win now front because you're getting 2 of those elite scorers and really giving up 1. But the potential of Gary Trent Jr., I'd be reluctant to do that deal. I'd be interested to see what people will have to say about that deal in the comment section below. You also have to worry about their futures with the Toronto Raptors because if you're not going to be able to pay the star boy and Gary Trent, you're probably not going to be able to play both of those guys in the future going forward as well. So let me know what you guys think about those potential trades in the comment section below. But we're diving into another topic. We're diving into the next thing. It's Dalano Banton being named an all-star for Team Canada. Now, Dalano Banton wasn't on Team Canada's roster for most of this offseason in terms of international competition games, but this is for a different tournament. This is for FIBA America Cup, and Dalano Banton had an interesting performance in this tournament. Now, I'll throw it on the screen. He was named an all-star for this America Cup action, right? The only player from Canada, along with a Norris Cole, who you love to see. I believe this is in Spanish, so this quote, but you can see all the names, and Campazzo, a few guys that played well in this tournament. But Dalano Banton is I'm happy he was named an all-star. Obviously, this is a lower tier international competition. We didn't have any of our core guys. For people that don't know, there wasn't any Shai Gilgeous-Alexanders on this team. There wasn't any even Dwight Powell's, Kelly Olynyk, Corey Josephs, the usual suspects for a Team Canada roster. None of those guys were really there. So Dalano Banton, a lot of B-tier Team Canada players, which, still solid, but Dalano Banton was the clear de facto leader. And I was happy that he was able to perform well enough to get us some wins. We weren't completely smoked. He wasn't in over his head with the added responsibility, and he had a couple big scoring outings, right? Averaged 16 points per game for the tournament, 4 assists, 5 rebounds, but the concerns with Dalano Banton remain. Even though he was named an all-star, we all know Dalano Banton, he can slash, he can pass, right? He can do all the things as a bigger guard, a bigger wiry guard that can have a positive impact on a team. But if he's going to be a rotation player for the Toronto Raptors going into this season, he needs to, 1, cut back on the turnovers. And in this tournament, averaged 2.5 turnovers, had some, which is all right, which is solid. Didn't have big assist outings, so he wasn't trying to force the issue, which I'm happy that the turnovers dialed back, even though some of the turnovers were kind of ugly if you watch back the games. But the turnovers are a big thing, and the three-point shooting is the other big concern with Dalano Banton. And that didn't look too hot this tournament either. And he shot 28% from the three-point line this entire tournament, of 9 of 32 from the field. But it's a lot more streaky than that. That 3-point percentage, I wouldn't be as indicative, even though it's even pretty low on that front, because he had one game where he shot 4 for 7 from the 3-point line, which is obviously amazing against Colombia. But other than that, you look at the 3-point shooting splits: 1 for 5, 1 for 7, 1 for 6, 2 for 7, 0 for 0 in the final game. If Dalano's going to have an impact, if Dalano's going to, take that step forward, right? Last season, teams just camped in 2-3 zones whenever Dalano Banton would be out there on the court. And even though he's capable, he's not Ben Simmons-esque in terms of how horrible he is from the 3-point line, he's going to need to be able to knock those down or just become such an elite slasher. It doesn't matter, but that's going to take bigger frame, Giannis-esque growth for Dalano Banton. We can't expect that, but the 3-point shot, I like that he's taken them. I like that he's not afraid to take them. I like that he's not a young socialite in terms of avoiding shooting those shots, but those percentages got to go up if we're going to expect big things for Dalano Banton coming into this season. So let me know what your thoughts on his performance in the AmeriCup action. Probably would have liked to see him be more dominant, but let me know what you guys. It was lots of positives and lots of question marks to take away from this tournament, but that's not the only thing we're diving into this video. And the next thing we're talking about is Raptors basketball returning early. And this is coming from Blake Murphy. Obviously, we discussed how the preseason was released and Raptors basketball is returning early October. But it turns out we're going to see this team play in full action in September 30th. And this tweet, as I mentioned, come from Blake Murphy. The Raptors have announced that they'll have an open practice and charity scrimmage at the end of training camp in Victoria on September 30th. That's right, folks. 16 days away as of recording. A couple weeks left till we see how this Toronto Raptors roster, how this squad looks on a basketball court without all the cuts, without all the breaks in action you see in the Rico Hines runs. We're going to see how they look fully combined, fully together, and especially those deep bench guys that are fighting for roster positions. It's going to be fun to see how they perform in some action, right? 2 weeks away, folks. Get excited. But the final thing we're talking about, the final thing we're discussing is Thaddeus Young showing his value as a vet for the Toronto Raptors. Now, bringing in vets is essential when you have a young team. They need to be able to guide the rosters. You don't want like a Philly tankathon season you had a couple years ago. It's good to mix young players with vets, and that's why this team had a lot of success last season. That's why they're on an accelerated rebuild. And Thaddeus Young is the guy we brought in last season. Some people thought we overpaid by giving away a first-round pick, even though we got a second-round pick back. But I was always hyped to have Thaddeus Young on the roster, solely on the fact his veteran presence, his hustle, his ability to rub off on other players, as well as his impact actually on the court, where he's washed by no means. He just signed an $8 million contract per year. Knock down those middies, can facilitate that down there in the low block. But he had this inspiring quote, right, showing off his some nuggets he has as a 16-year NBA veteran or something. I forget what he mentions in the video. So I'll play that clip here now.
I hate because I love this shit. You see what I'm saying? You gotta love this shit. And if you love this shit, you're gonna put your body through torture. And when I say torture, I mean torture. Coming this with 2, 3, 4 workouts a day. He can tell you, he's been there with me since 8th grade. I've been doing this since forever. And it ain't stopped. I got my first contract, the work just started. I got to the league, the work had just started. I got my second contract, the work still was going. Third contract, work still going. Fourth one, still going. I'm on my 5th contract. My 5th one. 5th one. Now that should tell y'all something. You ain't gotta be a 20-point per game scorer in order to have a 16-year career, let alone a 5 or a 6 or a 7-year career. You don't have to be that.
I mean, if you're an NBA player and you're not getting hyped by that, you shouldn't be in the league, right? Thaddeus Young bringing up how important it is, play your role to fulfill, how you can get paid 5 contracts by just doing your role, by doing your thing. And that's huge advice, huge talk from a guy in Thaddeus Young that's been there, that's done pretty well everything you can do in the league, and showing that he's made his money playing his role for players like Precious, Dalano Banton, Scottie Barnes, OG Anunoby, players that might reach stardom as a role player, that could find their niches on this team. That's absolutely huge. So happy we have Thaddeus Young on this roster. Happy that trade went down, and he's proven his worth even in just off-season clip videos. And even though he already proved it by crossing up Embiid this NBA playoffs. But let me know what you guys think of all this Toronto Raptors news in the comment section below. As mentioned at the beginning of the video, we're on that road to 26,000 subscribers, and we're keeping you up to date on all the latest Raptors news. So subscribe to the channel, helps us out big time. And folks, yeah, you guys are the best. I'm signing out. Cheers.